We can reduce it down and we can say that.
I do too.
Good evening and welcome to this working session of the Lakeville Area Schools Board of Education. This meeting is being audio recorded, so for attendance purposes, we'll go around and introduce ourselves. Please make sure and speak loudly and clearly for the microphones. They're in the tables in front of you. Please say your name and your role. Kim Baker, Chair.
David Anderson, Vice Chair.
Terry Lynn, Board of Education.
Judy Kelleher, Board of Education.
Emily McDonald, Assistant Superintendent.
Sean Murphy, Principal, Lakeville South High School.
Elida Kane, Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning.
Kim Booty, Principal at Lakeville North High School.
Amy Idovest, Dean Assistant Principal at Lakeville South High School.
Brian Thompson, School Board.
Bill Holmgren, Executive Director of Business Services.
Dave Haven, Executive Director of Student Services.
Brenda Albrecht, Executive Director of Administrative Services.
Bree Shinley, Board of Education.
Doug Manziel, Superintendent.
We also have Dr. Carly Anderson joining us virtually. Carly, can you introduce yourself, please?
Carly Anderson, Board of Education.
All right, just so that everybody's aware that you're there. All right, so now that we've done introductions, we'll just go ahead and get right down to business. We'll start with our discussion and upcoming recommended actions. So the items that we're discussing tonight will be something that will appear on our next board meeting that the board will have to make some decisions on. So we'll start with item A, which is the Lakeville North High School and Lakeville South High School link crew calendar change request.
So you can see we have quite a crew of folks with us
We
this
do.
evening. And
For a
they're here to
calendar
share
request.
some information with you, kind of give you some background on why this is taking place, just so you'll be aware, and they'll probably touch base on it if I steal your thunder. Many schools around the metro area have link crew. And this is really something we've heard from our staff and from our students to be able to try to connect and hook our ninth graders into our schools, and so this is really one of the opportunities to be able to do that. So, Elida, are you taking over from there?
You did take quite a few of the words out of my mouth. But I will.
I'll take them back then.
No, so thank you. So in your monthly board update, we did provide some information about Link Crew, and we'll definitely take some questions from everyone right now. So everything that Dr. Van Zyl is exactly right, looking for continued opportunities to support all students at the high school level, particularly our ninth grade students when it's a transition year, which can always be challenging at any grade level when transitioning from one level to the next. And I'll turn it over to Kim to talk about that calendar change that we're going to talk about tonight, and then we can field any questions specifically that you might have about Link Crew.
Sure. So our proposal is this, and I'm just going to give you the proposal and then give you, along with my colleagues, some additional information. The proposal request is that Lakeville North and Lakeville South will have the first day of school for ninth grade students and Link Crew leaders only. All other students that are grades 10 through 12 will do a digital learning day. The goal is to get all of the students in the building, meet with staff, meet with Link Crew, and have an opportunity to transition into high school on that first day of school so that they feel prepared to actually hit the ground running day 2 with everybody in the building.
And I'll just add a little to the why behind that. Both North and South High School sent 3 teachers from each building to a link crew training this year. And it was stressed at best practice that the first day with freshmen only, with the upperclassmen, junior, senior link crew leaders to get them acclimated to the building. We all know that ninth grade is a huge year for students to have success, and link crew activities throughout the year. Amy can talk about as well what those activities will look like, but that first day is extremely important. Did talk to some of our neighboring districts, Prior Lake, Farmington, and Burnsville, all have freshmen only on the first day of school and have link crew and have reported very positive success on that model. This year we had a 2-hour late start and did some things which was good, but we're looking to up that a little with the addition of link crew.
Yeah, so Link Crew you'll see across the nation. You'll see it locally, but you see it across thousands of schools across the nation. It really is the structure where we build leadership in our juniors and seniors as well too, who have experienced that large transition, and they can speak to those experiences better than any of us can, right? Or they'll hear it from them and look to them as leaders. So they get a ton of training about leadership and what that looks like and how do you support our ninth graders throughout the school year, not just even on that first day too. So first day is like the big kickoff day, and it's important to have that targeted time, but we also have big plans of also supporting them throughout the school year and utilizing our link crew leaders. So then obviously it structures some team building skills, kind of that transition to high school, tours of the building, having all of our staff there to support every student, right? Like, so even our English language learners, our special education students, our AP students, they will have all of their teachers there to support them in that transition and welcome them, answer questions, and ease them into the high schools.
I think just a piece I want to add to that is that we have done transition programs in the past prior to school starting, as early as 3 weeks early, 2 weeks early, 1 week early, during workshop week, and ultimately you're always battling a couple of things. First of all, if you do it too early, there's not staff in the building. Secondly, when there's not staff in the building, students like our special ed students, our EL students who really need that connection are not able to connect with the teachers. And we're still dealing with families that are on vacation or doing sports and things like that. So having it happen during that structure of the first day is important because everybody is together, including students and staff, and those upperclassmen come in and provide support and help build the school culture for the course of the year. So our proposal includes having the 10th through 12th grade do a digital learning day, and the lessons would be about syllabi and different team building and SEL activities that would happen normally in the class anyway, where the teacher gives that information. It would allow our upperclassmen, many of our upperclassmen, to still get that information, still be ready to hit day 2 running. It just gives kind of a pause so that we can then meet with those 9th graders and really get them set up. A lot of our upperclassmen are involved in that day, so that gives them a chance to really invest in this group or this pot of students that they're going to be spending the rest of the year with, coming back to multiple times over the course of their advisories and things like that. So what it looks like is that the 9th graders still ride the bus to school. They come to school on the first day. We start at 8 o'clock and we run them through the schedule, but we also run them through team building. We also talk about how do you get through the lunch line? How do you get to different places? What are the different spots in the building that are important for you to know without having 1,500 other students to kind of trip through as they're trying to find all of those resources and be ready for the start of the school year. So that is our proposal.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we do anything like this anywhere else in the district? Like, do we do something like this for middle school, like 6th graders, or is this just like starting at the high school?
A day specifically like this, we do not have a day that is specifically called out like this. They have an experience where kids can come, before school starts, but nothing that replicates exactly like this.
Okay.
Sounds like a good transition plan.
Yeah, I think really one of the most positive things is to develop a relationship with those older kids, and they see them during the year. I think that is major. I think.
Friendly face.
I was going to piggyback on that because I think that's the one thing that we hear from, like, when you bring our students of the month to Rotary and the young ladies that I mentor, they really thrive on finding relationships in lots of different areas to be able to help. They're not afraid to ask for help if they've developed a relationship. And so I think giving them another avenue to develop relationships, especially with, peers and teachers and stuff like that, I think is really going to be beneficial for those kids.
I can't think one negative thing about it.
No.
I mean, the first day of school is all, you're not learning anything.
Syllabi and
Yeah, this is what.
Informational.
Yeah.
It's all informational. Kids don't learn anything first day of school. They learn the system in each classroom. So, yeah, I like the idea.
Yeah, it's great.
How are we gonna do it with special ed? Same type of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, all kids would participate.
Yeah, their teachers would be there, support staff and everyone.
And actually,
That transition.
Amy can
Yeah.
talk a little bit about this, but the selection of link crew leaders, juniors and seniors, not just looking for the highly involved student.
Yep.
they're looking for a variety.
For it to really represent the demographics of our student body, right? So we want a student that is involved in every different aspect of our high school. Our Link Crew leaders did a great job presenting to our staff and asking our staff to recommend students, right? Because they're the ones on the ground and see them interact with their peers and what they could provide as a leader in our building. So we had, at least at Lakeville South, 200 applicants to be leaders.
Wow.
That's awesome.
250 at
Yeah.
And
which is-
that's unique, that they're
unique.
choosing students
Yeah.
of all different walks
Yeah.
of life, which I really found beneficial for our building,
That's awesome.
so.
I
yeah.
have a couple questions. Awesome idea. Kind of wish it would have been this last year. I'm afraid. There's a nervous Nelly going.
Yeah, and now it's recorded for history. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Mom.
No, I love it. I think it would be very beneficial. How many Link Crew student leaders will you plan on having? I mean, you had quite a few applicants, so how many do you take for this?
Right, so really around like 100 to 115 is what
Oh,
you
wow.
want, because
Cool.
you want to put students, ninth grade students, in a group of about 12 with 2 leaders and a couple different roles, so that's kind of our target number.
Okay, and my last question, for digital learning, is it going to be an in-person experience for the 10th through 12th graders, or is it something that they just have to do on their own? You know,
On their own.
on their own,
Yes.
okay, so it won't be a face-to-face check-in type of situation, okay.
Be online, right?
And then I have one more question too. So one of the things that, since Dave brought up special education, that some of our students struggle with, especially that freshman year, is just finding someone to sit with, like at football games and things like that. Are you planning some of those types of activities so that you can use the Link Crew to kind of help,
Yep.
you know, find,
Yep.
people find their way so
Yep,
that they're
exactly.
not.
That's why Link Crew is
Right,
so awesome.
okay.
It really is trying to get a connection point with every
Mhm.
kid.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it would be, yeah, that'd be
I'm
awesome.
just mumbling.
I can't understand his mumbling. Carly, did you have any questions?
No, when I read about this, I think it's a really great opportunity. I know people, I have a freshman going into Lakeville North next year, so I'm really excited about this. And I just think this is a great leadership opportunity for our juniors and seniors. I think it's great. I will say the corner by Brian, and I don't know who is next to Brian. I cannot hear you guys very well over there, so.
Oh, Amy.
Oh, really neat. I have the little soft voices.
The microphones are there, you gotta.
It's always me that people can't hear, so I just
We feel
want
my
to share
pain,
that.
yeah.
All right.
That was a softball.
I appreciate
Thank
us
you.
bringing this. I appreciate us bringing this into the district. I think it's awesome. I'm excited.
Brian, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so walk me through this again. So if you're a freshman, you get off the bus, there's gonna be nobody there other than just ninth graders, correct, in the building? And so I'm assuming they're gonna just attend each class like they normally would, but what are the 150 people doing in the buildings?
It's actually, it's a little more than that. So yes, there'll be a rotation of the class schedule, but it's not a full class day. So, for example, we anticipate that we'll actually bring all of the ninth grade into the gym, take a class picture, have some celebration and cheering, and then they break into their groups and get to know their peer leaders. And then at some point throughout the day, we actually will run the schedule where they get a chance to meet that. So the meeting place is in the gym to start off and kick off with a kind of a pep fest of sorts.
Got it. So then each class would be, let's say, like a half an hour instead of 45 minutes or something like that. All right, and so will you have the 150 Link Crew students, what do they do when everyone's in class?
They help kids find their classes, they'll go into classes.
Yeah.
Do they go into the class and sit in the
For sure.
actual classroom?
Yep.
So if you've got, so like a Link Crew, they're because all the kids are gonna be in different classes, so I'm trying to understand, like, how do you can't give them to a pod, and then, because the pods, I would assume each student's gonna go to different classrooms, right? Am I mistaken, or?
They'll go to their actual classes, but those pods will be set up by advisory. So they can actually go back to that same pod of kids throughout the year in their advisory time. So they might follow a group of kids into a classroom. It's not necessarily their kids, but now it's just another opportunity for an upperclassman's face to be recognized by the students.
So they'll sit in the classroom for those kids, they'll miss a day of school, they'll do their own stuff on day 2. Okay, that makes sense. And so, and they're all juniors and seniors, is that how it is? Okay. And then you're gonna have Link Crew activities throughout the course of the year? Are we like, and when do they occur? Do they occur during Cougar time or
Yep,
activity
that would
time?
be,
or-
that would be our goal, would be during Cougar time, so it doesn't
Okay.
interrupt academic time.
Right.
Yep.
And is that different from academic time? Or I'm trying to understand how, because there's a time where they go to a classroom, if they've got this missing homework.
Yeah,
What's
that's,
the difference between the
that's
two?
different, academic seminar. yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
academic seminar,
Yeah.
okay. And how often do you guys have Cougar time?
Well, this year we have it once a week. We're looking at possibly doing it twice a week next year.
And what do you guys do in Cougar time? I don't know, 'cause I don't know.
It's a lot of college career readiness activities. Kids do have time to catch up on work, check grades. The teacher will go over and grade book
Yeah.
checks and just kind of that announcement time. It's a shorter time period. They're paired with a teacher for their entire 4 years, so they have another adult in the building advocating for them.
Okay.
And so that's another touch point for our kids.
So during Cougar time, Link Crew would occur at the same time? Or
Possibly, yeah.
so that
Possibly,
junior
yeah.
and senior would be in that room and they would do activities or stuff
that
with
are
another junior,
meaningful
senior?
that year.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And so does this cost us anything? I don't know.
We,
The training and.
We, out of our staff development funds, send teachers to the train, 3 in each building. And also looking at the stipend for the teachers, we have 3 teacher leaders who are gonna be meeting and training these students through our staff development funds. We look to do that. We used to have something called Cougars Leading Cougars, which was similar. And our format was that we'd have 2 teachers oversee that, sometimes 3. They would split that stipend. Now this has kind of evolved to what that is. So that money's going towards this instead of that. And we did that before school started, typically in August. And that's what Kim was talking about earlier. Not all the freshmen could make it. People were in sports. People were on vacation still. We had issues getting special ed service for
Right.
our students, paras, for example, to come in. And so it was just becoming really difficult to do that freshman orientation before the school year started, so.
So then what do the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade teachers do?
They'll be there. They'll be there.
Because the kids will go in classes. There's a lot of teachers who
Yeah.
have multiple, they have ninth grade because they have multiple grades in a
They
class.
have to be accessible as well for us to take attendance for the students doing their asynchronous work. They have to be accessible in case a kid needs to ask a teacher a question regarding the syllabus.
For the digital learning.
Because
For
the others will be on
digital learning day for the other students,
Yeah.
they have to be accessible
Okay.
for that asynchronous work. And so they'll be on their most.
No, I'm not, so I want to acknowledge, I'm not saying this is a bad idea, I'm just asking so that, as I'm thinking about this out loud, then you've got 10th, 11th, and 12th grade teachers on day 1, just being accessible, and,
You know?
No,
No?
they're still
Because it's-
rotating to those teachers.
I might teach AP psychology. I could have in my AP psychology class 9th grade through 12th grade kids.
got it,
So when
okay.
they run that schedule, there might only be 4 freshmen that show up, because the majority of that class is upperclassmen. But the kids are running that schedule, and so those teachers need to welcome those students, meet
Now
them.
making a connection with the student,
Yep.
knowing they're the freshmen in that class.
This year, we did a similar thing with the 2-hour late start. When we ran the classes, we only did around 10 minutes per class. I don't see that being a big chunk of the day. I see the teachers participating in a lot of the link crew activities, the team building stuff. There's several examples that they brought back with them from the training. Our teachers are still in the midst of planning all this and what it looks like, but the actual run through your class period is a very short portion of the day. And then you have lunch, of course, with your classmates, which would be the only time, which I thought was cool, that the whole grade could eat lunch together.
Right.
And they can start their high school experience
Next day.
with everybody in that room together. And that's kind of a cool memory for them, getting a picture, like Kim said, in the gym, and then doing a lot of team building things. So the actual run through your class schedule is very minimal for this day. It's, I see it as maybe 20 minutes tops that they're sitting in that class. The goal is they know where the classes are located, they can walk their schedule, link crew people, teachers will be in the hallways guiding them. They get to meet their teacher, see who's in their class, and go to the next class. And so it's, that's kind of the way.
It'll help with anxiety a lot.
Yeah, it helps with
Yeah.
anxiety,
Yeah.
and especially for a lot of our anxious students.
Right.
You're going into a building, and we feed from several middle schools, including private schools that are very small, and they're going in a building of 1,800 plus kids with seniors. It's can be intimidating. So just getting them that, hey, they get to know a link crew leader who's an upperclassman. They get to eat with their fellow classmates that they've never seen. A lot of them have never met each other yet. Do some team building stuff so you get to know some different kids. And then, like Amy said, throughout the course of the school year, doing things, making sure lunchrooms are going well, because that's the biggest anxiety a lot of students have at high
Right.
school is lunch.
Yeah.
Who am I going to sit next to? And we want to make sure we can take care of that in a good first day of school. So, teachers will be busy. They will be involved with these activities, and the classroom rotation is not the chunk of the day, the large chunk, I should say.
Sounds good. So just keeping an eye on time, making sure that we can keep rolling through the agenda here. If board members have further questions, is there someone here that they could reach out to? Like, would anybody be?
Any of us, yeah.
Should I formally clarify the date change?
Sure.
Okay, so the request is that on Tuesday, September 3rd, for the high schools, only 9th grade students would be on campus. Grades 10, 11, and 12 would have a digital learning day. And then the first day of school for all students in person would be on Wednesday, September 4th.
Okay, sounds good.
Just to
Thanks.
clarify,
Thank you.
the reason this has to come to y'all is because you already approved the calendar. So
Right.
you
Right.
can make a calendar
Yep.
change adjustment.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's coming to you.
I was on the calendar
So
committee
that's
for
what you'll be
9/17.
asked to do on 2 weeks.
She's been on a
Perfect.
few
Sounds
times.
great. Thank you so much for your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Our next item is the resolution for tallying write-in votes. That's Doug and Kim.
So in the 2023 legislative session, there was a law that was passed that allows cities and certain local governments to adopt a resolution requiring that write-in votes only be individually tallied if the total number of write-in votes is equal to or greater than the fewest number of non-write-in votes for a candidate on the ballot. And without such a resolution, all write-in votes are individually tallied without the need for a written request by candidate. So basically what this does is, when somebody writes in Mickey Mouse as a write, you don't have to tally one for Mickey Mouse unless Mickey Mouse all of a sudden gets 100 votes, and that's close to the next person. So it saves the vote counter the time and energy, unless you can see that there's gonna be close. And so, again, this was part of the legislation, so there is a resolution that you can adopt that's been brought forward, and it really helps us and the city, correct me if I'm wrong, because the city, this also would be part of the city's ballots that they do as well.
Any questions on that? So basically, we're just not counting the write-in votes unless it gets close to the
Unless
lowest vote
unless
count
you,
of
like,
the
somebody
nearest
ran a
person.
write-in campaign, and let's say that Bree was running a write-in campaign and you knew that, well, you're gonna be keeping track of that. But if somebody's just writing Superman and Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, and you don't have to tally, keep track of all those. So it just saves the people counting the votes, time and energy on that process.
Brian?
Can I just ask a clarifying question on that? How would they know if they're not tallying, how would they know that a certain name isn't getting to that number that would require that?
Sure. To me, that's what the vote counting people do. They'd keep an eye on that and say, hey, it seems like we've got somebody, these first 5 ballots all have Bree's name written on it. So they would probably start trying to keep track of it. But they know, if you're getting Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse and those, if it's a real person's name, it's probably gonna draw more attention than what happens, and Kim can tell you on some of the ballot counting as well. They just write in cartoon characters or somebody else's name in there, and so you don't have to keep track of all those types of things that are taking place.
I think they are looking at the
Yeah.
votes, they're just not documenting them for the official numbers unless this situation arises.
That's my understanding of the legislation, why it was put in place.
Brian? Was that the same question you had?
No, it's right. I'll have to think through that one.
Okay.
So this would be something that if you choose to do that, will be on your agenda next.
And it doesn't
meeting.
cost us anything more or less, right? I mean, we're just,
It's just time.
It just saves the
to
time and energy of
tally
the people
those.
that count the votes.
yeah, and so how do we so what is the criteria again? Like if they,
It says, without this resolution, all write-in votes are individually tallied without the need for a written request by a candidate. Otherwise, what they do is they would adopt a resolution requiring write-in votes only be individually tallied if the total number of write-in votes is equal or greater than that of the fewest number of non-write-in votes. So I'm guessing they're gonna keep track of all the write-in votes, and let's say it's 100, and the lowest candidate got 500, they're not gonna have to go back and tally those 100, because it's not close to the lowest number of actual people that were on the ballot.
But if there's a write-in, can someone request that, like it was stated?
That's the way the way I understand it's written here, they could do it by a
A written
request by the
request.
candidate.
Okay. Makes sense.
Another one makes sense.
Another softball.
Yeah, another song.
but I mean,
I just don't want them to lose votes like they did last time.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
remember.
I think it's speaking to like the challenge of how some people do, I don't know if it's always Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck, but a lot of people will write in random names. And so if you're a person who's tallying all that and you have to write down, well, this person put so-and-so's name and that's only 1 or 2 votes because people, you know, I can appreciate that that's an annoying thing to have to keep track of.
yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, it sounds efficient, but again, this is voting. This is like I would assume an official proceeding in some capacity. And so there may be folks that just want to write somebody in and they may not get the 500, maybe they get 200. It could be a symbolic issue of like, I want to write this person's name in or not, and so then that's not captured. I mean, it's not just this instance, it's you know, the freedom to vote. And if you've got the freedom to vote, we should be making sure we track it. I mean, it's not, well, that's, I don't know.
But if it's a write-in vote, then you would, or if it's a write-in campaign kind of thing, or like
Yep.
they're saying a person who maybe decided after the date that they wanted to run, they could always request that they be counted. So it feels like there's the right for request for counting of that individual versus just how people randomly include names for fun. And that's not very helpful.
So this resolution is gonna come before the board at our meeting. If you have further questions or, we need more clarification, just let me know and we'll try to get that answered before Tuesday. Does that sound okay? Okay.
Good.
All right, so our next item is the long-term facilities renewal and 917 long-term facilities renewal. And then Bill's also doing the fiscal year 25 preliminary budget update. So kind of just rolled it all into one.
Okay, we'll start with District 917. As you know, District 917, we're a member of them, and they don't have any levy authority. The resolution that I'm passing around is a resolution saying that we will levy money for them, and then we'll forward the money to them. You can see that they have projects at $255,500, and our share is at $50,500. If you look at the next page, the Appendix A, there you'll see their costs and how they're broken down and where they came up to the $255,000. If you look on the third page, you see that where our share is. You'll see that we have more students than anyone else in the way that's split. It's first it's split in how many students, and then it's split evenly after that. Meaning our portion, our proportionate share goes up to 50,537.
And a big part of that, they had to replace the HVAC this year, so.
Yeah.
We're the largest district, correct?
Yeah, with the
We
number of.
We use them more students than anyone else.
I know we
In
use them more,
Tessa,
but I think we're
in
also
Tessa.
the largest district that feeds that system.
Me and Burnsville are the largest.
Burnsville.
196 pulled out years ago, and
Yeah.
they're doing
Yep.
most of their own programming on their
Right.
own. Otherwise, if they were still in, they would be the largest.
Got it.
Yeah, well, Bloomington will come in right after.
I'm gonna say Bloomington is pretty high there too.
Yeah, so.
Anyway, so that's what we'll bring forward to the next meeting, to approve that, so that's included in the levy this fall.
is there a cap on the number? I mean, I see the 255,000. Is it, what was it last year? What was the year before? Is there a trend, or is it?
Our share last year was 35,000, so it is an increase
Yeah.
from what we've done in the past.
That's why I brought up the new
That's because of
heating
the
system.
HVAC.
Yeah.
Yeah, that age back.
Okay.
Second piece here is, of course, our long-term facility maintenance. They present the
Brian?
board with the projects that we're planning to do.
Is there other, like, I only
Please
have
pass
The
it.
handouts, thank you.
We'll talk about 25 in a little bit when we talk about the fiscal year 25. But we have to put together a 10-year plan to go to the state of Minnesota to give us authority to actually levy for the project. So you can see here for our plan for fiscal 26, with a total of a little over 17 million. It's broke down by the buildings that we're doing that work in. Approximately the same amount every year, a small increase. Look at inflation, and this builds about the inflation rate as we go forward to make sure that we can get the maintenance done on our buildings that we need. Second page of this, of course, goes to 26. We have a lot of detail what we plan to do. Pretty much planned out for fiscal 26 and 27. You see that 27 is a little bit higher, it's about a 4% increase from 26. The third page, of course, is the full 10 years. The top portion is our health and safety portion, which runs pretty close to $1 million, a tiny bit over, for all health and safety projects that are in our buildings. That's been that for quite a while. And then the second portion is strictly long-term facility maintenance. But now that health and safety is part of it, you see that that's rolled into the total. So when we look forward then to 28, then we're at 19, and then it grows a little bit as we go across. So certainly let me know if you have any questions on any of those projects. The last page is the revenue portion, how they figure the way that we get our money and which areas either levy or if it's bonded. So the top portion, let's just look at 25, that's what's coming up next. You can see that our estimated pupil units there are 13,196. Every district in the state of Minnesota gets $380 per pupil unit. You can see that for us, that's a little over, almost $5 million. But there's an old formula, which we are still part of, and we get the higher of the two. If you take the next portions, the old formula health and safety, the old formula facilities debt revenue, and our old formula facilities pay-as-you-go revenue, and our old harmless bonds, you see that we're eligible for $26.5 million in this particular year. And a lot of this has to do with the bonds that we're paying off. If you look to the second portion, of course, now we're talking about the debt service and how it matches up with their revenue. So you see that the debt service revenue, which you see above under the old formula, debt revenue, the same number, 11.8. And then our other bonds that we're paying off are at 6.2, and that 1.6, that's our brand new bonds we just sold here this last fall. You see that payment's at 1.6. So it comes up to that 19 million, and then we get some equalization aid and some debt service aid and equalization aid. So the 1.4 and 3.5 add up to that $5 million that comes off the 19. So there are levies at 14.7. The 6.8 on the bottom is the general fund portion of LTFM. If you remember, LTFM sits in two different funds. Anything that we sell with bonds sits in the building fund and Fund 6, and any levy pay-as-you-go is here at $6.8 million. So that said, that is our LTFM plan here for the next 10 years. And certainly let me know if you have any questions. We'll bring that back to the board for approval.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so again, clarify with me again, help me understand, you've got levy dollars that we tax, and then there's dollars that you get from the state for LTFM?
Small amount, you see the debt service aid, it's about 2/3 of the way down for $1.4 million.
Got it, okay.
That comes from the state of Minnesota, and also the equalization debt. We levy up to a certain point, and then the state starts helping us when we get over a certain amount. So that's that 3.5.
And how much do we levy the community then? Is it a set number, or is there a fixed fee percentage, or how do we figure that out?
What we pay on the bond side is whatever those bond payments are in that particular year, that's what we pay. And if you remember during the levy process last year, we had a big switch over from regular bonds to now our LTFM bonds. And we did that, years ago on purpose, trying to keep our levy percentage the same. So that's why for quite a while, we had a smaller payment on our LTFM bonds because we didn't want our taxes to go way up. So now we're catching up. So this year, actually we can talk about that when we get to the budget.
Because I'm looking at fiscal year 2025, that's next year. So when I'm hearing fiscal year 2023, the current school year that we're in, right? We've got $3.3 million in bond payments, and then next year it's gonna jump to $6.2 million, correct? And then in 2026 is $8 million. And so this long-term facilities maintenance plan I'm looking at now, the first page for $17 million is coming from the 26, or it's coming from that 6. I'm sorry, that $8 million
I
fiscal year
didn't quite follow
26.
which numbers you were pulling, but the bottom, let's go way to the bottom.
Yeah.
You see that says general fund portion of revenue. That's the portion that we pay as you go. And we're levying the community, that's 6.8 million, there was 6.6 the year before.
Got it.
Okay, and that slowly grows above that 5% as we go forward. And we left it at that amount. So that is a direct levy to the community each year.
Got it. So we tax the community $6.6 million a year
Yes,
for long-term facility maintenance
yes, and the bond payments.
and the bond payments
Okay.
that we approve.
And that goes back to that, for next year, it's 14. But the year before, you see, it was very small amount.
Yeah, yep.
But overall, the payments coming out of Fund 7 are the same, it's flat. We had a bunch of building bonds that got paid off. Now we're gonna increase the bond payments on the LTFM, which is the plan. Okay, that was the plan when we sold the bond, what years we were gonna pay out how much. But the amount that we're paying in bond payments is about the same each year.
And then just to clarify, there is no reductions to the long-term facility maintenance that we can do to offset our general fund balance, correct?
It's all restricted dollars, so
Okay.
anything we save here or do something different, it doesn't save the general fund anything.
Doesn't say, got it.
It just lowers the levy.
Got it. But the levy that we are taxing our community is the same percentage or the same dollar amount, or not the dollar amount, but the same percentage as previous years.
Correct.
And what
It's based on our net tax capacity.
okay.
That was a good question, Brian. I was thinking the same thing.
Well, that's a chart that Eller shows you, that shows you your bar graph being flat across. So
Yeah.
you stay consistent over time, so you've seen that. That's their plan as they help
Yeah, I
you
think it's like
financially as the
20%.
district to maintain the taxing ability on the community stays level, so you don't have a bunch of peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
Fund balance.
What was the percentage?
I don't think
I
it's a
don't
percentage.
have the percentage, I don't have that detail in front of me. I know that our debt service for next year is about 20.
That's right. That's,
Yes.
yeah.
So you can see how it's going to fall a little bit and be flat for 5 years. So that tax rate remains the same. So as our net tax capacity increases, actually, everybody's tax actually
Goes down.
goes down a tiny bit because it gets diluted.
Except mine.
Yours will go down too, Dave.
Oh, you live in Burnsville,
It's
that's
not
why.
going down.
You live in Burnsville, that's why.
So I do have, again, just a minor, not a minor concern, but again, so as I'm reading this document correctly, we're gonna tax our community $6.6 million for long-term facility maintenance to upkeep our facilities.
Correct.
And that percentage, the total long-term facility management spend that we do from our budget is gonna be consistent with our previous years in in total percentages, okay. And the only thing that I do notice that in 2027, that jumps from 6.6 million to 10.7. Is that my understanding?
That is correct.
So that's almost a 50% jump in taxing, increased taxes in 3 years. Why is that?
Look up,
Oh,
if you look up
so
a
bond
couple
payments.
lines, you see the bond payments are going from 14 to 11 to 8.
Yeah.
So the total is about the same.
Any other questions on this document? Okay, let's move on to the budget.
We're on the third part, right?
Yeah, there are 3 items on that.
Yep.
I can't read this in this meeting.
You can't read this?
Not in this meeting.
Okay. So the board's asked me to bring forward a budget sooner than we usually do. I want to be very clear that this budget is in draft form. It's far from finished, okay? This is our best estimates at this time, and we'll walk through what those are. But when we come back next month, you're going to see changes. They're not going to be huge changes, but you're going to see changes pretty much across the board, okay? As we're hiring, now we know where we can pay a person, or we have a, estimate in there at this point. So it's gonna move back. So I just want everyone to be aware of that before you grab onto some of these big numbers and assume they're gospel.
It's recorded, so you're good.
Okay.
I have a question. Is this assuming the contract passes?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Actually, the very first 4 pages of the handout I gave you is a memo from me and my staff that gives you an overview, but we touch on some of the bigger pieces that happen. So right away, that first paragraph, well, it's actually the second paragraph, but anyway, we talk about the TA and expecting, and we are planning to use that as our numbers for our staffing amount for next year. Okay. So, right page here.
Carly, can you hear Bill? I know you have a hard time with the people in the corner, so I'm just checking.
It's mostly good.
Okay,
Want me to move it closer?
maybe, yeah. Bill, you get your own microphone.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That is better, thank you.
Okay, here I've just put up, just give you an idea of our budgeting cycle for the year. You see that coming up in June, we do our preliminary budget, and then behind Carly, you'll see that we end our year out in July and through October do our fiscal audit. And then in September, of course, we're talking about our preliminary tax levy for the next year. And then in November, December, we'll bring that final audit information to the board. And then we do our truth and taxation in December. And of course, then we bring any type of mid-year budget adjustments that we need to do, we bring back to you at that time. So that's really the 3 big pieces from the finance office. It's of course the budget, the audit, and the levy. Here's just a quick reminder of where we are on enrollment. For next year, we're looking at about a 50 student increase in our elementary, about a 50 student increase in our middle school, and we're seeing it relatively flat for the high school, at least for another year or 2 before it starts to take off. Of course, that bubble of the new students that have been in the elementary are starting to push into the middle school, and of course, they will hit the high school. So for next year, you see that we're looking at a total estimate of 12,201. It's about 179 new students into next year than we have now. Now, in the front end of that, the memo that we put in, let's first talk about the general fund revenue. See, I need to get too much stuff. Oops, sorry.
Just whack it. How old, Carl, are you?
Okay. Let's talk about revenue for next year. So for fiscal '25, we're seeing a change in our State sources at $4.3 million, about 3.1%. Of course, that's the 2% that we're getting from the state of Minnesota, and the rest of it is coming from new students. Property taxes, you see there, increase of $5.6 million. That's 11.2%. A big piece of that is, of course, restricted funds. When we look at our levy information, I did include that in your handout. Past the memo and what.
Why is our enrollment increase much lower than 24?
We got more students last year than we're getting next year.
We are, okay.
It's not a big change, but
Yeah.
it is a change.
Interesting, okay.
Okay. I did include the levy. It's the fourth page after the memo. You see the levy information. Again, front portion is our operating levies. That's undesignated. We can use for what we need to do with our, but every single thing else on the levy is a restricted fund. All the assigned components, and of course, all the capital pieces, along with Fund 4 and 7. Back to our federal sources, you do see a decrease in the federal sources. That's because our COVID dollars are coming off. We got just one very small sliver that we'll be using for next year of about $130,000, and then it's all gone. So back down to about where we were before COVID, back there, $3 million. And of course, our local, of course, that's anything we collect from the public is all of our other, along with some rental fees and along with interest, things like that. So small increase there. Of course, because we have a few more funds, we're going to get a little more interest. We got 2.5%. So overall, general fund revenue up 5% from the previous year. Now, on the very first page of the memo, I did break down so you can see the state dollars and how they break down. I made a PowerPoint so that the public could see it. We have a small group tonight, but I'm trying to make sure they see the same pages.
What is compensatory? What does that stand for?
That's dollars that are generated from the free and reduced account that we have for extra programming for those students. Most of our compensatory dollars go into our LEP budget because that's where we're way short. So we're allowed to use it there, and that's pretty much 100% of it goes there. So overall, you see there, again, 3.1% new money in our state funding. I guess, is there any questions specific on any state funding?
What was our total in fiscal year 23 last year? Out of curiosity.
Oh, I have to get the report.
Okay, that's fine. I'm assuming, I'm just curious to see if I want to know if there's a big, I would assume there's a big jump because we don't jump from 4%.
If you remember the year we're in, we have a large increase because of new funding. It's about a $17 million increase.
Yep.
And most, a big piece of that came from our special ed funding, new from the cross subsidy. Okay. Here again, the property tax, just to break it out so you can see that the unassigned is our operating dollars there of an increase of 3.5 million. And then our assigned components and our capital, they're about $2 million. And again, like I said, there is a breakdown if you want to see specifically which components are assigned and unassigned when it comes to our levy. But of course, most of that dollars are all restricted funds. They're always tied to something that the state of Minnesota wants us to spend our money on.
So for pay 24, that's this current year?
Correct. Pay 24 is this year.
Okay.
Just finishing up.
Got it. Pay 25 is,
Pay 25 would be what we're talking about for next year.
got it.
Bill, can I ask one clarifying question?
Sure.
This is actually back a couple slides. With the enrollment increase, that's not like a 10% reduction. That's just not increasing as much as it did this year. Right?
Correct.
It's still 1.3 on top of the 1.4, just not as increasing as much as it did this year,
Yes,
right?
the new students were receiving $145,000 less than we did the year before, but it's still an
Okay.
increase of $1.3 million.
Thank you.
But that also means we still need to hire staff,
Correct.
so.
If you look on the second page of your memo, on the bottom, you'll see there's some estimated new FTEs that are coming online for this next year. Mainly the Highview Elementary School, between licensed staff and unlicensed staff, we have about 19 new FTEs. Again, remember that during the levy process, we asked for $100 per pupil unit new levy, which generates us $1.3 million to cover that cost. Okay? And then also the growth that we're seeing in our enrollment, we have approximately 7 new FTEs, just general teaching staff for our new students in our elementary schools. Okay, let's move on to expenditures.
Hang on. So if we're adding only 200 students each year, roughly, that equates to 7 new elementary staff?
That's the way it's working out when you look at our standard, when we look at the size of the classrooms
Okay.
and the number of students. So depending exactly where they
talking about
hit,
the
sometimes, yeah, the guidelines.
guidelines?
Sometimes we might need one more teacher, more than we think, because we're very close to that guideline, we need to add another classroom.
So if we're adding 200 new students, assuming, I'm just making a number up, 25 in a classroom, that's 4 for 100, so that's roughly 8. So again, estimating
So it's
7.
Pretty much right in line for
Got it.
what we use.
But of the 200 that are coming, they're all elementary, like there's no middle school, there's no high school, there's ballpark, or just,
There's approximately 50 on the projection that are elementary and approximately 50 that are middle school.
Okay.
At the middle school, the way that they staff that school, we don't have to add any teaching staff to the middle school.
okay.
He said that was like the enrollment was going up in elementary and middle, but not at the high schools, correct? Isn't that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, the high school is the same, there's no change.
Yep.
Because the teacher-student ratio in middle school is larger, we can absorb those kids in
Right
without
now,
adding
yep.
additional
Yep.
FTEs there?
The way they staff it, and right now those class sizes are smaller, so there's room for some more students in middle school.
Got it. So that's of the 7. And then the 19 new FTEs at the Highview Elementary would be like paraprofessionals
It's,
or
it's,
admin?
it's a brand new principal.
Yep,
It's a
okay.
new office manager, it's a new,
Custodians.
it's a new band teacher, it's a new music teacher, it's a new STEM teacher, it's a new art teacher. Okay.
Custodians, cooks.
We have 4 custodians, we have 5 new
Cooks are
cooks.
under a different.
But wouldn't
cooks are
the
under a
band
different
teacher and
Well, that's true.
It's on this
custod-
other page.
wouldn't the band teacher be coming from the other elementary schools as well?
No,
I mean, why do we need a brand new one?
there's a FTE in band in every single elementary school. Okay, so you can't take away from elementary school because they need the time for their specialist time to educate those students.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
so
if
that's
they're-
why every single one of those specialties, art and STEM, band, music, they're all added staff.
Got it, okay. So there's no sharing that's done, I guess.
Yeah, well, the band is shared, it's not a full-time FTE, it's like a third of it. One band teacher does 3 bands.
But I thought I just heard that there's going to be a new band teacher in this building, full-time, or no? Well, we can take this up.
It's a .33 FTE.
0.33 FTE, got it. And so when you add it all up, you get roughly 19 new
Correct.
FTEs as a
Yeah,
whole.
not everyone's at full, like, gifted and talented is only a half FTE.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not just 1 for 1.
But the bottom line is that the 1.3 million in levy 1 that got passed is going to be there to cover these additional expenditures.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the only thing that we will need to add is the new 7 FTEs, but that's going to be covered by the addition of the 200 enrollment increase.
Yeah,
that
if
we
you look back,
anticipate.
remember, we have an enrollment increase of $1.3 million.
Yep,
And remember, this is the draft. This
Yes,
is not,
totally agree.
so when
Yep.
we're throwing out numbers, this is not set in stone.
yep.
Staffing is not finished, and I get changes every single day.
Yep.
Okay. Now. Okay, let's go to expenditures. That'd be on the second page, starting on the second page or third page of your memo. So first, we're breaking down the expenditures by program. You can see then the salaries, and when we, I have this labeled wrong, so I apologize. This page here is not by program, it is actually by object. It's my mistake, I'm sorry. Salaries and wages, we're seeing an increase of $5.6 million, about 7.5%. Of course, that's because of the increases we've given the unions and the increased FTEs that'll be on staff for next year. Employee benefits, approximately the exact same percentage increase. At this point in time, purchase services are about the same as it was the year before. Our supplies and materials are up 2.5%. Our capital expenditures are down, mainly because of our leasing. We did a lot of leasing the last couple of years on new devices. That we're not doing next year. Those are all in place, so those expenditures go down. And then the other is really insurance pieces. So we're seeing some big pressure on insurance of over 10% just on that alone.
We're still 18 million in a hole, even with the state help.
Okay, then if we look at the program area, then you can see administration up 7.3%. Again, we have one new administrator in that group. District support services. Actually,
Can I quickly jump in? The 7.3% is the new principal, and then
the increases.
The increases in people's just regular wages every year, that just goes up automatically based on the contract that we have.
Correct.
Okay, so it's not, we're not adding new headcount, it is just everyone's wages have just gone up the next year.
Correct.
Okay.
We look at our district support services, actually a small decrease for next year. Our elementary and secondary education, of course, we just talked about that. There's new staff members in that area. That's when you see an 8.5% increase. Vocational.
Can you clarify again, what is district support services again?
That's most of what's happened is here in the district office. So it's our HR department, it's the business office, our MTSS department. I'm trying to think of all who's in there. And it's Emily's office. So,
And then your administration is the principals?
all the principals,
Okay.
superintendent, pretty much all that's in there. And of course, elementary, secondary education is just all the classroom teachers, along with, well, we don't have any very much in help there. So vocational education, you see increase there.
Can I quickly pause? The cost in this that we're looking at, so elementary and special education, the 88 million, that includes salary and wages, correct? I'm sorry, and benefits. So it's just the cost of that entire program?
It's a whole program, so
Okay.
it's
Taxes
salaries,
and
it's
all that.
salaries, it's benefits, it's supplies, it's equipment, it's everything that goes into that department.
Okay.
I just
Vocational
want to jump in
education.
and,
Whoop.
oh, sorry, Brian, if there's another mic, I really can't hear Brian very well.
All right, sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Why don't you shift it to the other side? There you go.
You can go around. Okay, vocational education, you see a larger than you would think increase there. Of course, the number is a huge number, but what happens lots of years, depending on what classes are offered at the high school, only certain classes are eligible for vocational dollars. So where we're seeing an increase in vocational, in secondary, you're gonna see a corresponding decrease, just on those particular handful of teachers. Special education overall, we're seeing a 2.7% increase. The community education, of course, is listed on there, has never been in the past, but that's the unemployment that we expect to pay for employees in community education, because we get reimbursed. And at this point, both community education and food service are not allowed to make that payment. Instructional support, that's all our deans, that's all our supply people, support people in our elementary schools. Pupil support services, that's of course is our technology, it's our transportation, it's our nursing, things like that are in that area. We're seeing there an increase of 10%. One reason for that, of course, is we do have another nurse at HPE. Sites and buildings, you see a little decrease there. That's again because of some leasing costs that have gone away. So that's a flat for a year, so that's good news. And again, that fiscal and fixed other programs is mainly our insurance program. And, we're seeing some big increases. Insurance companies have seen lots of loss the last year, and they're pushing it. If you haven't looked at your own car insurance, your house insurance, you'll know that it's going up 10%.
It's gone way up.
It's big. Okay, where are we at here? Oh, let's talk about capital just briefly. I do have some pages, about 3, 4 in, talking about our capital. So first of all, our operating capital, you see that's split. We get it from 2 different areas. We get a little bit from the property tax, and a little bit from state aid. They're about $3 million, a little over $3 million, looking at spending 2.5 there this next year. And you can see that we're spending, in our sites and buildings, and that's all. It's furniture, it's equipment for our custodians, things like that. Data processing instruments, we've been trying to catch up a little bit on our instruments for our teachers. We have some. They send me pictures of some instruments that are pretty beat up. So. Ice time, as you can see there, we cover with that. We have an assessment from that brand new street, 210th. Last year, remember all the work that was done? We have an assessment there, tax assessment of $32,000. That will go on for 10 years. The security that you're seeing there, that is camera security in our buildings. And of course, our copiers are there. Capital projects levy, you see that's grown a little bit again because it's based on our net tax capacity. That rate stays the same every single year. It is bringing in $3.9 million. And then you see where we're spending those funds. Of course, the digital tools for learning is our technology department. By far the majority is supporting that department and devices. Our STEM resources, looking at about $400,000 for next year. And our security management, again, those are our cameras in our buildings, another 300 there, 2 different places. We're trying to get some things caught up. When we look at long-term facility maintenance for 25, and we talked about 26 and beyond. Now, these are the projects that most of this has already been bid. We already have the contracts in place. Actually, a couple of these small areas we're starting. The new boilers going into Eastview, they've actually started on that this week already. Anything they can do not to bother the students. So this year we're spending $16.3 million on our long-term facility maintenance. Now, okay. So here's just a breakdown of our fund balances. What we're projecting for the end of the year. So again, our non-spendable, about $400,000, that's really our prepaids, anything that we've paid for ahead of time that we use in the next year. Our restricted funds, of course, our capital funds, LTFMs, things like that. Our set aside, we can't include them, but you see there an increase from 24 to 25 in our unassigned, about $1.8 million.
So Phil, can I ask a question from someone who doesn't, this is a lot to take in, right, for someone who doesn't speak finance like you do. I guess it just seems like we're overspending overall, right? Because I just see the unassigned fund balance, it's not really going up a lot. Is it, I just don't feel like we're getting enough revenue in to keep us afloat. Is it just me?
Well, the positive thing is the fund balance is growing.
Right.
okay? I'd like to see it grow faster.
I would like to see it
Absolutely.
go faster too, yeah.
But of course, that goes back to the new costs that the state is expecting us to pay. There's actually legislation out there right now to pay extra costs for our training our teachers. It's gonna cost us $600,000.
Right.
So we've got to build that in so we have the money available to do that.
So where do we see that? So I'm on page 3, and that's what I don't see. I see like district support services, yeah, we're spending $5 million. I see instructional support, $22.8 million. Like, I don't see the line item that says I've got 15 deans and this is how much they cost. I've got 75 blank support people, this is how much they cost. Transportation, I don't see that list. So like, when do we get that?
We'll get to it.
Okay.
I have more things for you.
Okay.
He's got
Okay.
more things.
So we're looking at an overall picture of the budget right now.
Yeah.
And of course, like I said, this is not final by any means, but I can say that we're not overspending for next year. Okay, we're increasing the fund balance by $1.8 million, which is about 1%. I mean, is that a huge amount? No. The board's policy, of course, is to be at 5%. So
Right.
doing that is going to take us, 2-3 years to get back up to that 5% level. And if you remember when we talked back in February, we showed that we would hit that 5% level in 4 years.
So I guess
Okay.
like, when I think about like where the fund balance was several years ago, and we had to spend it down to, to get it down to 5%. Like, what were we doing differently where our fund balance was going up so much and we were making all of this revenue compared to what we're doing now and it's kind of creeping along? You know what I
Okay,
mean?
well, if you go back, yes, the fund balance is lower now.
Yeah.
If you go back, it was kind of flat. It wasn't growing, it was just there.
We had
But it took a
successful,
while to
we
get
had
there.
successful levy referendums.
Yeah. But at the same time, it wasn't
So if you
growing.
want to change much with the fund balance, it's gonna tick away $1 million at a time. Or you go out and do a levy referendum to bump it up faster, to give it that cushion, or you do budget cuts.
Correct.
There were several years in there where we didn't have a levy, where it was high like that. I guess that's where I'm, like, what were we doing differently to keep it that high instead of having it down here?
The fund balance, if you go back to 18, it's been dropping ever since.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it wasn't growing, it has been shrinking every single year, for multiple years. And yes, that is spending more than we bring in, absolutely, that's what happened. And like I mentioned 2 weeks ago at our meeting, when the pandemic came, the board was very supportive, saying we need to put supports in for our students, and that's where we really brought down that fund balance. And that was a plan, it was planned. It's just at the end of that, to get that curve and turned around, we probably should have done cuts one more year earlier.
Yeah.
Or, I think the intent, if I remember correctly, we started having some discussions about doing a levy referendum
Yes, we
for
did.
that purpose. And then with COVID, couldn't do it, didn't do it, and then that's.
It all got pushed down the road,
Yep, and that's when it all,
yeah.
Can I jump in with a question? Because I know I asked this a couple weeks ago, and one of the areas, when I had looked at this, and obviously this is some new information here, but when I had looked at the big changes across the expenditures, it was in the salaries, which our district is growing, and raises made sense, and also in the instructional supports. And in 2019, we also passed the tech levy. So, and I still am struggling to understand, did we do things on a technology level where we're spending a lot more there that the levy itself that is not covering that additional cost? Because there's a lot of supports, I think, involved in the tech side of things. Is that correct?
The new tech levy covers all the new spending we have in the tech department. There was multiple new.
So what has changed with the instructional supports?
I'm sorry, say it one more time?
What has changed with the rising cost going from 7 million to 26 million or something like that? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but from 2019 to that time frame, I don't think we have the levy to cover that. Like, what is changing in there to go from 7 to 26? that to me is part of the biggest change in expenditures over time.
Okay. Well, first of all, the new tech levy that went into place covers all our devices, and it also covers multiple employees. Okay? So anything we added in the tech area is covered by, number one, the tech levy, number two, the technology portion of the new operating levy in 19. Okay? Also, remember that year, we added 25 FTE in the middle schools, which was over $4 million.
That was teaming.
Okay, so we had a new operating levy, so we saw a lot of new spending when we got to fiscal 20. Okay, but at that point in time, before COVID came, there was money to cover all those additions that we did. Okay, there was some SEL money, there was the tech money, there was the middle school money, but all that is covered. Okay, so you see a lot more spending, of course, because we're bringing a lot more money in. But it's, the only reason there is new spending is because we have the new revenue.
Did that line up though on the, I mean, when I just looked at the summaries, it was like it was somewhat flat in terms of our revenue, whereas the expenditures were dramatically increased and we were over budget every year for several years.
We had a lot of new expenditures when we looked at 20 and 21, and maybe I'm too early, 21, 22, those 2 years, the COVID years, if you remember, I just mentioned that the board has indicated that, yes, we want to support our students, but when we look at 21, we had actually over 70 new FTE hired that year. The first year wasn't too bad because we had a lot of federal dollars to cover a lot of that new cost. And one of the big pressure points there too was the online school that we had to hire many teachers to support the 1,000 kids who switched from a brick and mortar to our online school.
So Carly, I have the numbers in front of me for 2009 or 2019 instructional support services. It was 7.5 million. 2020 was 10.9. 21 was 12.8. 22 was 18.8. Fiscal year 23 was 25.1. And then the budget for this year was 23.3. So I guess I'm not seeing the jump where you said it was like from 7 to 25. Like, yeah, in 2019 it was, and then we've made that climb up from then until now. So I mean, it's definitely more than doubled, if that's what you're questioning.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I keep coming back to is if you look at the upper line of the revenue, it's not increasing to that amount. So I appreciate that we had a levy to cover tech, but I also wonder, were there specific decisions made related to COVID on the instructional side that are we continuing that to our detriment, or is it costing more money? We're spending more? I'm just still confused about that.
After we finished with
Really?
the cutting process last year, all those new ads that were added back in those years are gone. They're done. We had to take them out because we didn't have revenue to pay for it. Okay, that's when we had to do the cuts, because we had added all that FTE earlier during that period, and they can't stay. They have to go. So that's when we had to go through a cutting process. I mean, we also had our fund balance falling, but it's because we were overspending. Okay.
But then wouldn't we see a decrease in what we're spending, Bill?
Another way that, let me rephrase that. While we may have made those cuts, it may not show us on the page because you're just seeing this high macro number. Underneath it, the details may also show there's cost in inflation, there's cost in wages every year that keep going up, there's cost in benefits that keep going up every year. So the number itself won't decrease because all of our expenses generally are not stagnant or static. They're going to continue to go up, is my understanding. So every year it will never be the same as previous years unless you're making significant cuts to other areas, is my understanding.
Correct. If the staffing remains relatively constant, you're going to see a 4 to 5% increase
Every year.
every single year.
Even though you may have the same head count in regards to students, it's just that the cost of just doing business every year increases.
Yeah. Remember that we're seeing an increase in our enrollment also, 2.5, actually, a year ago was 3%. We need new staff for all that, so that's growth in the budget every single year above just our regular increases in our salaries. That's why we're seeing 9-10% new expenditures every year.
Yeah, and when we only receive from the state roughly, I think on average, 2% a year, it's not enough
Right.
to offset the expenditures that we have in our current state just to run our operations, as they just naturally get more expensive every year as we go on.
Yep.
That's how I understand it.
Yep.
Very clear.
So we're in a position now where we're growing the fund balance, but it's growing relatively slow. But we're not deficit spending anymore.
And the question that you have to ask through that process is not that we all like to see it grow more quickly, but to the detriment of what? Because I think if you visit with our staff, they're still feeling there's more supports needed for behavior and interventions, there's more supports needed for counseling, social emotional help, curriculum, we're getting a math adoption now that hasn't been for, how many years has it been?
So over 20.
Over 20 years, math. So you could try to grow some things more quickly in the fund balance, but it's to the detriment of our students and our staff if we try to do that. So you're either making reductions or you're not providing some of the resources that need to be provided.
So what's our process as a district where we, like every year, what are we doing to like look at like all the curriculum that we have in place, all the things we're purchasing as far as supplies for buildings, or like things that maybe were purchased at one time but not everybody's using, you know what I mean? Like looking at what our staff is using and making sure we're putting the supports there. I'm thinking like subscriptions and all of that. Like, do we go through that process every year and look at, like, do we still need all of this? Are there things that we can cut out of this? We're not just continually adding on, like we're reevaluating every year. What's the process for that? That's my question, sorry.
The process is
I talked around in a circle, but.
Those decisions go to our administrators. Each building is given a sum of money based on how many students they have in that particular building. And then they make the decisions on what supplies they're gonna buy, what subscriptions they're gonna buy. All those things are decided at the building level with their staff.
And one of the other things that we've put in place is Bill meets with each one of those administrators. Emily's a part of that, Dave's now a part of that, HR is now a part of that, and they have to walk through their budget with our team to be able to explain where they are and what they're purchasing.
Okay.
And so it's just not a blind, hey, you get $10, now spend $10. They've got to be able to explain where those $10 are going. And really, in the grand scheme of things, the budgets that our buildings get are not astronomical. They're not. So when you're talking about the materials and supplies, a majority of our budget, as you know, is staff and services that we purchase. So those are the things that we have to be able to monitor and measure as closely as we can. And in a growing district, that's a blessing and a curse, because if you get 300 kids and you were projecting to get 170, now you've got 130 more kids that you've got to now figure out how you can staff in particular areas. So.
Right, and I guess like I'm just in my mind, like thinking about the process that goes through every year, but then that also kind of ties into the district vision of, we don't want like this building doing something differently than this building, like we would want the curriculum to be similar, right? So then these little outlier things that may have gotten purchased, like, oh, we're gonna not do that next year, or looking at like how much we're spending on different things, like printing and laminating, and you know what I mean? Like, it's just like what's our process for auditing those things every year? And granted, it's a small percentage of the budget, but when we see like where we're going, we need to be able to sustain a healthy balance, right? Like, sorry.
We have to build it. And I think one of the other things, we have a very supportive community. So some of those outlier things that you're talking about, in the past, somebody could go and say, well, I'd like this, and PTO would maybe purchase that. We're trying to help bring that systemic consistency across the board, because they do a great job supporting our schools. But as Emily can tell you, there are certain things that some schools get because their fundraisers were more than another.
So
and
then
so
it creates
we're trying, and now
inequities.
they're having to walk through that process. Again, not that we don't appreciate the support, but it does create some imbalances and inequities. And so that's what we're also trying to project when Emily's taking a look at the state, and you've got social studies standards, and we finally got math standards, and there's science, just got, you know, we're gonna get hit here in the next year or two with curricular needs that we're gonna have to budget for. And so that's one of the things you have to take a look at, is if you're not gonna buy the curricular items, there's some things that maybe build your budget faster, but we're sure not gonna not meet state standards and not try to be proactive in getting those things done.
Okay. Thanks.
And Kim, I think, one of the faster, you really have two different pathways. One, either as a board, make a decision to ask the administration, what would we need to do to find $2 additional $1 million to get us back to 5%, or $5 million, or $6 million, or whatever it may be, whatever the number the board feels comfortable with. And then they run through an exercise as you guys did last year to say, hey, what can we cut for an extra $2 million? What does that look like? And then make that decision. Or you do a levy in the fall and ask the community saying, hey, our fund balance is this. These are the things that we have. You ask for additional funding to offset those costs and kind of go from there. I mean, we don't make enough widgets. We don't make widgets to make money. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, we want to move on to just the rest of the pieces of the budget. Right after the general fund portion.
Hold on
I
a
have-
second, Bill.
Can I just interrupt
Oh,
real quick?
sure.
Teresa and Lane, I just believe I will log in and listen to the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
Is that good, Kim?
Yes, thanks,
Okay.
Bree.
Nice
Bye,
job,
Bree.
Bree.
Bye.
Hey, in our long-term facilities maintenance, if we're spending 17.3, how much does it cost to build a dome at the south building?
Well, okay, two things. First is around $4.5, $5 million to put the fabric on that dome along with the mechanical systems, but I can't use LTFM to buy it.
You can't buy it. All right. So it's $5 million to build a dome? All right. I didn't think it was that expensive.
That's a lot.
Okay.
That doesn't count putting it up, taking it down.
Yeah, that doesn't.
If you're gonna put
count
it
the
up to stay
maintenance.
permanently, it's probably
Yeah,
gonna be
then we have more
closer to
cost.
quite a bit more
Well,
expensive.
I don't know that we, yeah. Don't we run into something with some formula?
The reason the dome goes up and down right now is because there's a third party using
Yeah.
our property, and
We
it's-
can't go past 6 months or whatever.
Right.
Right,
That's an IRS rule,
yep,
and we can't change it. If we would put something up, it's different. We can put it up permanent,
Yeah.
but there'd be a little more cost to it, because then we'd have to have a fire suppression system,
Yep.
which we don't have any water out there. I mean, there's lots of costs
Yep.
to go along. But
Parking lot.
you don't have to pay the $35,000 to put it up and down. No, so it's a trade-off.
but we don't pay that though,
No, we don't pay that.
yeah,
No. That's not our cost.
yeah, that's their cost,
Yeah.
not ours.
Okay, I'm gonna just move on briefly then to food service. I put in your packet, as you go down through it, you'll get to, right after that, you saw that graph that we just talked about. You'll see a memo from Kristen from food service, along with an overview of her budget. You can see at this point, we're seeing another change in our fund balance. They just keep growing. We will run into a problem here. There is a limit on how much money we can have in the bank when it comes to food service. It can only be up to 6 months of your previous year's expenditures. We're very close to that. And actually, the state is talking about changing that back to where it was at 3 months. So we talked a little bit about that. So you're gonna have to find some ways to get that.
Why are they talking about that?
That's just the way it used to be. I don't know the reasons.
They're not making sense again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, they probably figure they're paying for meals, so then. make some
4.3.
adjustment.
Got it.
Yeah,
What do you
so-
do with that, like the 4.3 million? I mean,
It's used to run that program, but at this point, we're bringing in enough funds to run the program without using any fund balance.
Bill, do we, just a question on nutrition, do we provide the meals during the summer too? Like the free meals during the
No.
summer?
No, you have to qualify to give free meals away in the summer.
Okay.
And your free and reduced count has to be over 40%, and we are not at over 40%.
Okay.
So you see some schools that do serve some meals in the summer, that's because they're over that threshold. And then, yeah, the state pays for all your labor and food and everything. It's a great deal for kids.
But summer adventures, when you pay for that, you can pay to have. meals.
Yeah, we have meals for those students, but yes, they have to pay for that.
Yeah.
Or it's built into, I can't remember, it's just built into their cost. So we do have food service people working in the summer, but it's not funded by the state of Minnesota.
Okay, could we use that 4.3 and build like, food outlets inside the north and south buildings? Like, hey, one's a McDonald's, one's a Subway.
No.
You
sorry.
can't use that?
No. And actually, there's a state law that groups like that can't compete with food service. So you can't bring in a food truck. You can't bring in someone else serving food during the time that we serve food.
Could there be any consideration of, like, if this continues to grow, is the nutrition department thinking about maybe bringing in more nutritious options?
Well, they work on that on a regular basis. I think if you go to the high schools, there's a lot of options for those students. I mean, the elementary is not necessarily so much, but the high schools have a pretty good lunch program.
You still have to meet federal guidelines as far as what you can serve.
Yeah. Man, I think that's
Yeah,
fascinating.
just thinking about options for salads, or, I mean, I think, like you're saying, Bill, I haven't seen the high school options, but middle school and elementary are pretty, I don't know, standard of what I remember going to when I was a kid.
No, you're right, there's only a couple choices at the smaller or the lower levels.
I don't know if this is right or not, but I ended up watching something and it's like, I think in Japan they have a dedicated nutritionist for each individual. And so they create each individual, they create a meal plan for each individual, and that's what they do for all of elementary.
Stop.
Saying 4.3 million, either we lose or use it. I'll go with the meal plan for each individual. Why not?
Is pizza involved?
There wouldn't be enough salt on it for me either. I wasn't-
All right, keep going, Bill.
Okay, let's move
Trying
on.
to keep an eye on time,
Let's
like,
quickly
we're at
move
30
on to,
minutes and now we're like at an hour
community
into
education. You see there's another memo there from Steve on his budget. And then his budget, of course, remember, had the same issues. He had a big drop in his fund balance during COVID. They're working on drawing it back. It's going very slow. This budget here is approximately level for next year. That's, again, because a piece that happened during COVID where they have a big piece of revenue. As you know, the levy kind of lags behind 2 years, and they are a decrease of 100 grand this year that they did not anticipate. So that's part of the reason they're not making much leeway. At the same time, these budgets that Steve has been bringing forward have been very conservative, and they grow faster than what he anticipates. So that's good. It's a small increase anyway. Let's go to the building fund. Should have another page in your packet for that. Of course, most of what's going on in the building fund next year is just going to be our LTFM program and just finishing up the elementary. Of course, we still have our retainage to pay out and so forth. So you'll see there, spending down that fund balance, almost $14 million. Our debt service fund, you see again there, revenue over expenditures. We do have a negative there, a deficit spend, but remember that's planned. As we levy an extra 5% for our bond payments, that fund builds up, and now we're sending it back. So we have another $1 million going back to our taxpayers as a decrease in the levy. Still have $3 million in that. Agency and trust, really what's left here, not much left in this except for our scholarships. So these are scholarship monies that we received from donors where they want that principal to stay intact, and then we just use the interest for students going forward. So it's balancing there about $860,000. Internal service fund is really where our insurances sit, both our health and our dental as self-insured. We started this, remember, 5 years ago. We now built the fund balance up over $7 million. So this is going to start helping the district and our employees with less insurance premium in the future. This past year, we had a 5% increase for everyone, which we share. And then here, just a fund overview. You can see everything these are all these pieces kind of put together. You can see now that our total revenues for next year is about 282 million, with expenditures of 294. Again, remember, a lot of that buy down is from our building fund, which is planned. Every other fund is picking up a fund balance in some way. Now, just briefly, I have put together some reports with a little more detail in. Now this is, Brian has asked for the 3 years, so I put 3 years in here. You see the change for the last 2 years, so from 24 going into 25, and a % change. This, of course, is on the program level, and when you see something getting a little higher, it's usually because we have another FTE in that area. Now you look right, the first line, you see the Board of Education. Well, it's because you put your salaries back into the budget, so you're seeing that 30% increase. As you go down through here, you can.
You need another one?
For an example, we look at under elementary, secondary, regular instruction. The second line, elementary education, you see a 12.5% increase. Well, that's because we have new staff both at the elementary level, pretty much across the board. And those 7 new FTEs we talked about, along with some of the new specialist positions. So when you see art at 12%, that's because it's another FTE. Here you see business, that's only 1,700, so it's a big percentage, but it really isn't a big change.
Well, and I think that's one thing to point out. Percentages are deceiving. So when you see 28%, you see 17%.
28% of nothing is
Well,
nothing.
I'm just saying, so percentages, when people go off of that, is not an accurate. You need to take a look at the whole context of what's their dollar amount and percentage.
So anyway, I think just, if you have any questions, let me know. I mean, just trying to break this down a little more for everyone. You can see where the increases are happening. But like I say, most of the time, we have an added teacher or two on one of these lines when you start getting above 10%. Take those and pass around.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, one more report for you, built the same way, but it is by object. So you can see, then under the program area of the Board of Education, you can see what the salaries change, what the benefits change, and so forth down the line. And you're seeing that same 28.8% in your change overall in your program area. So it goes right down the line in every program area. You can see the split down by object. And again, the changes. Some of these percentages, they have some big percentages, but it's a very small number. But if you're seeing in a salary area, there's usually another FTE in that particular area. You look at the second page, again, is a good example of the elementary education there at 12%. Well, we know there's 7 FTEs popping in there. But, and along with all the other increases that teachers that are already here are receiving. So I hope this helps a little bit. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know.
This is very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate your work on this.
So that's all I have for this evening. We will continue to work to finalize our numbers. So I guess I just want to say again, it will look a tiny bit different when we get to next month.
So just to clarify, this is a draft and this is not something the board will be voting on?
No.
next week? Okay.
I mean, it'll
Just
be
want to
very
make sure that
similar.
everybody's on the
Yeah.
same page with that.
Yep.
All right.
So, 2 things that I think we should just make sure that, so first of all, this is in the right direction, so I appreciate that. Super helpful. When I look at the special education, page 4 of 6 in the expenditure object by program code, we're spending $38.7 million in this school year is what we're projected. That's the budget, is how I'm reading it.
Yep.
Okay, yep. And so I think, and then I look at general instructional support, which is $4.8 million. So I think we're getting close tonight, so I appreciate being able to distill down from just a high level, here's the total general fund, and then we're down by the program code. So then here's like what's next? Because like, when I look at the general instructional support, like I still don't know what does that mean? What makes up that $4.4 million? And then when I look at staff development, we're budgeting $5.1 million of that. What does that mean? And what are we spending on that? And so I get, like, for example, I get the superintendent office, I get the Board of Education office, but the other categories I still don't know. And so I don't know if you can create like a cheat sheet saying that, hey, general instructional support is this, and blah, blah, blah. And so another thing that I think, so thank you for that.
Isn't that shared as part of MSBA's training, what each one of those categories are?
I'm sure, and it's in UFAR's book, but, I mean, I can.
Okay.
So those are all components that if going through your training.
These are statewide, every school district uses the same.
Yeah,
Well, then
it's, yeah.
So I don't have, well, if you could, that'd be great. And so the other thing that I want to be thoughtful of is like, elementary education here, all right? We're page 2, we're spending $27.6 million in elementary education. And so I have no way to like say, hey, are we spending the right amount or not? And as a Board of Education member, I have nothing to validate, like, hey, what I do see here is that we're spending $23.7 million in '23. Now it's $24.2 in '24, and we're projected for $27.6 in '25. And so I think that's like where it would be helpful for me, and again, I don't know where everyone else is at, but it would be helpful for me is like I don't know if that's a good number or not. And so majority of our expenses is gonna be just headcount. And I get that, it's salary, it's like, that's what it is. And so, if, it may be helpful for me if there's a way where we can allocate or show, all right, elementary education, did we have, I'm just gonna make up a number up, there's 100 people in '23, and we had 123 people in '24, and there's 143 people in '25. But the number that we should really try to identify or think about is like, what is the cost of that program per student? And is that the right cost for that particular category? Because the longer that we go in the elementary education, the number is just gonna keep going up because wages go up. And so next year, in fiscal year 26 and 27, it's gonna be 30 million and 33 million. But again, I don't know like if that's good or not. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
In our board book, I mean, we don't break down per student in every single category, but we do compare our spending against the state of Minnesota. So you can compare in some certain areas. And actually, the state of Minnesota has a really nice website where you can go and compare us to different schools and to the state, and you'll see where we are at. We certainly aren't higher than other school districts when we look at a per student count. There's a couple pages, of course, that aren't included today because we just aren't done. We do bring a page forward that shows our spending per building, per student. So you'll see what's happening in all of our different buildings, which I think helps a little bit. And it's interesting, you'll see that some buildings are definitely higher. That's because they have more senior staff. They get paid more than others, okay? We also put together a grid that shows everything FTE in every single building on a grid, and that's in that budget book. And we'll bring that forward too, and then like when we finish our book.
I have the book.
Yeah.
Well,
Or at least the last one you gave
and I
us.
guess I would say this, and I'm not, it's a board decision, it's not an individual decision. So, what problem are we trying to solve? What information are we trying to get? Because in comparison to what? We already able to compare to what the state spends, but you can't necessarily compare what we spend to Minnetonka because they're gonna be completely different on their tax base and where they generate revenue. You can't compare us necessarily to Farmington because of what we have and the size, and so it's, I guess, to say in comparison to what are we trying to solve with this? Because I think Bill provides quite a bit of information, even though you may say it's not right or it's not headed in the right direction, or I forget what it was that you said. I think he's trying to provide what you as a board are asking for, and he can't provide 7 individual differences. He has to provide what you as a board feel are those priorities. And I think that's what he's trying to do. And that's, I guess, what I would ask is what guidance and direction do you want from that? Because I think anything you want, he's basically able to generate if it's a consistent something that you want. That book that he puts together that Kim has a copy of, if you go through that, there's a boatload of stuff in there, correct me if I'm wrong. Or if you go to the website that he mentioned, it compares us, you can pull all that information together to be able to see where we are in comparisons to others. So I'm trying to help my finance person as well, because he can't keep running around 7 different directions trying to provide 7 different answers. He has to be able to provide what you as a board, as a whole or majority would like to be able to see. And then that helps him nail that down and be able to continue to provide that.
So as a board member, again, just one, you guys have to chime in, and I'm just saying that from my point of view, I'm looking at these numbers and it doesn't tell me anything. And so I would look to.
But what would it tell you if you knew, if you were able to go to that website like you shared and you looked at those things?
So I'm not gonna go to that website. I would look for you to do that for me.
Why would you
provide guidance
not
to
do
the
that
Board
if
of
that's an
Education
information
that
that you
we
want
are spending our
individually?
money accurately, and we are spending it comparatively to other districts, or, like, I'm just looking at a number, and so, like, if you want me to just rubber stamp stuff, like, that's, like, that, like, well, what's the intent? And so, that's what I'm looking for, is getting clarity around, all right, we're spending $27.6 million in elementary education. What does that mean? I have no idea. I just see a number and I see that it keeps going up. There's no story behind it. There's no FTEs, like here's how many FTEs that we added. The cost of these staff per pupil is XYZ dollars. Like, I don't want to go through 4 different budget packets and compare. We had 47 teachers in Lakeview last year, and then we had 53 teachers the year before that. I mean,
the FTEs on the board summary that we get, like the district dashboards, like that's on there. I think like the only thing and this is again, one board member, one voice, that I see on that FTE thing is that I do appreciate when you say, hey, we added an elementary school this year, so that accounts for that extra 19 FTE, because we're trying to watch that bottom line, like as a board, and have this broad picture, right? So then I know, like, hey, this is how many FTE we had last year, this is how many we have this year, and this is why it increased this year. Like, that's really all.
And those are the
as far as
specifics of
that.
what he needs to know to be able to provide you what you want. And that's all I'm asking, is that if it's just something that you as a board can agree upon that a majority of you want, Bill has no problem trying to put that together. But there are some things that we're not going to be able to provide individually, just because an individual wants that. We can guide and direct you to where those things are, and then if it's something that you share and everybody else is like, hey, that's something that we like, then I think that there's no problem trying to gather those types of things. Because I think he is trying to put together, in my time here with him, a several-year look rather than a 1-year window of what's going on. He's trying to go back 2, 3, 4 years as best he can to show you. But some of those things you aren't going to be able to compare, because even when you take a look at what happened in COVID to what's happening today, is a vastly different spend of what's going on and different things. I can't second guess the board and the superintendent that made those decisions at the time. We can only try to work with trying to solve where we are now to try to set us up to build that fund balance, to take care of our staff, to take care of our students financially.
All right, so.
But I do appreciate him asking the question, because he is our treasurer, so there's a fine line there. So if you want to get together with Bill, I think that would help us, because this is a lot, although this is a lot more information than we got earlier last year, so I see both sides.
Can I jump into here? I just want to say one thing. I do agree that, Bill, it's helpful to get more information. One of the things that I've been thinking about is just, with regard to the special education, we know that our spending is way more in than we bring in, and the cross subsidy is only partially addressing that. And so one thing that I was just thinking about that could help us as a board, because this came up, as we're considering future contracts and things like that, is how, I know there are some challenges in terms of how this current language impacts special education. And so are there ways for us to try to capture some of that information, so that's information that we can use to inform our decision making and how we educate the public or how we educate our staff going forward about the spending on special ed. Because we know we offer great services, we know people come to our district for special education because it's so great, but also I think there are some things there that are a challenge that we as a board member, or board, don't necessarily know, but it does influence how we go through negotiations and things like that. So that's one example of how I think as a board member I would benefit getting a little bit more of the behind the scenes of that kind of information.
Dave, did you have something?
Well, and piggybacking on that is, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, we don't get near what we should get from the federal government, right?
No.
It's
I
not
mean-
even close.
No, I mean, it's,
I'm-
it's
18 million.
It's not even
We don't
close.
get
the
The
percentage.
new cross-subsidy piece helped, but it helped kind of retroactively based off of the cross-subsidy impact that we had before. It's not, so like, if we continue to then, like, exorbitantly spend, which we're not, like, we're keeping pace right now.
I didn't say you were. but-
No, I'm just
Yeah.
simply saying, we're keeping pace right now. In fact, we've added to that, but if we add more to that, like, that's just gonna keep adding to the cross-subsidy at this point. So, and I think what's hard right now is as we try to build back the fund balance, like, keeping pace with that while still accounting for real needs, which is, like, we went up, child count went up, I don't know, between 80 and 100 kids this year on IEPs.
Right.
And so it's,
And
we
that's a
can't
lot.
keep it.
That's a lot.
It
That's a
is.
lot.
So like keeping flat's not possible, but at the same time, what worked in our advantage kind of, even though it was a disadvantage a few years ago, is that when I got here, some of the spending was really uneven. So we've been able to like even it out and bring some of those costs into norms across the district, workload and caseload analyses, so that we aren't, you know, really jumping up in a really big way right now as we're trying to build that fund balance.
I think we've had a great discussion on the budget. Like, do you still have more to add? Because I'm looking at it's going like we've been an hour and 15
You know,
minutes.
but I
on
would
this.
like, last point,
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say too, I think to Carly's point, like educating you guys on how some of this works might not be a bad idea, especially in the area of special ed, because unlike some of the other areas, aside from maybe the federal dollars we get for special ed, it's not pupil-based as to how we get that, it's expense-based. So like we spend a certain amount of money and we code it in certain ways and then we get some of that back. It's incredibly complex. But like even when you look at the ways that we divvy up our spending on this sheet you're looking at right now, if you look at 401, that doesn't mean that that's just all of our expenses related to speech language. That just means that's what's coded to speech language. And the reason we code things in certain ways, we want to make sure that for the students coming here that are not 194 kids, that we actually have a bill going back to that resident district that captures the right amount of expense. So we try to space all that out.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to wrap up the discussion on the budget for right now. I think it's something we'll obviously revisit since this is just a draft. Bill, thank you so much for your work. Like I appreciate the detail and the time that you put into this, so thank you for that. If board members have any other questions, make sure that you reach out to Doug or I, and we'll try to get that answered. So, all right, so the last item that I have under discussions is the policy updates, and that's Brenda and the policy committee, but we'll start with Brenda first.
Yep, I don't have anything new to bring forward this
Okay.
evening, other than an update on the policies that the policy committee brought forward.
Okay.
Those have all been sent to legal counsel, so I'm just waiting to hear back from him on the go-ahead for those.
Perfect.
Good.
Brian, did you have something, or Judy from the policy committee?
We've got one underway right now. We are probably about 90% done with the initial draft of the cell phone policy that we would like to have under consideration. And so we'll bring that forward, hopefully, maybe at the next working session. And then I can share that with you ahead of time or not, but we can probably wait and have it just go through the normal process. We would probably look to the administration quite a bit around logistically how one would implement something like that and get feedback from you guys. I think from the policy committee, the intent is that if we could have something like that implemented for the upcoming school year, that would be ideal. But again, we'd be mindful of logistics, training, and timing, and would get guidance from you guys on the next steps. So, heads up.
Perfect, thank you. The next thing we have on our agenda for discussion is an update from the Community Engagement Committee. Carly, did you want to go ahead and do that?
We just had an event this morning, Terry. I don't know if this was kind of your event that you were excited to lead, so I don't know if you want to provide the update.
For the event this morning, give an update.
Oh, yeah, we met at the Heritage Senior Citizen Center at 9:30 in the morning.
Active seniors.
What?
Active seniors.
What does it mean active?
They're not senior citizens, they're active seniors.
That's, okay, well, I guess I am
We'll go
too.
with senior citizens.
I guess I am too.
You may be a senior citizen,
I
but
am.
they're
Oh.
active seniors.
But anyway.
We own it.
Anyway, the audience was small, but it was very interesting to talk to those people. It was, we had a handout which we left there. If anybody wants to stop by, there's some handouts that you could get that gives a kind of a general overview of how we're growing and our buildings and our taxing and that kind of thing, and how we compare with other districts. I felt it was a very beneficial session, and I only wish we had more people there, that's all.
I would only add that it was really good to hear their questions. And the only thing I would kind of add to that is just there were clearly a lot of questions that were based on what people are hearing in the news. And, you know, I think what we were trying to encourage is thinking about what's going on for your kids or your grandkids and what you're hearing in our community, as opposed, so getting your kind of news about what's going in our schools from our schools and our community, rather than kind of what's going on the national stage or the state level too. So I think that was just one thing that was really important discussion, is just how we're hearing about what's going on in our schools and what's real and what's maybe just sensational news coverage kind of stuff. So I thought it was a good discussion around that.
Totally agree.
Awesome, thank you. All right, our final item on the agenda tonight, Brian asked for some time to talk about financials as the treasurer for the board. So, Brian, what did you have that you wanted to discuss?
So I've got a draft proposal here that I'd like to kind of discuss with the group. I have brought it up in previous meetings where I would like to suggest that maybe we look to have a comprehensive analysis of our school district financial operations. The intent here is 4 different items or bullets of the scope of work. 1, an assessment of our current state. Conduct a comprehensive review of the district's financial operations, focusing on the people, process, and technologies that are leveraged. 2, stakeholder understanding, provide itemized categories of the current year's financial spend in a format understandable to the average stakeholder, ensuring transparency and clarity. 3, future state recommendations based on the assessment. Develop detailed recommendations for improvements in financial operations, including but not limited to personnel training, process enhancements, and technology upgrades. And then the last bullet would be a financial executive summary. Prepare a detailed summary outlining the depletion of the district's savings account over the past 4 years. Identify and analyze the costs that contributed to this depletion, providing insights into the factors that led to the current financial state that we are in today. So that is the scope of work that I am proposing that we get an RFP on, and I will leave it for you guys to review it, think about it, and we can discuss it at the next working session.
So I have a question. So I know we've talked about this at a previous working session, where we were talking about some sort of an audit, and that was in relation to, I think, the programs that we were using. And I thought that Bill went and talked with some people on that, and they said that there really wasn't an update that we could do with our technology. Am I misremembering that? Like I kind of remember it's been a while.
There's very limited systems that the state of Minnesota has okayed for school districts to use, because it's got to integrate with their mainframe system. So there's only 4 systems that we actually can pick to use from the state of Minnesota. Out of all of those systems, the reporting information that comes out of that system isn't any different than the one that we use. Okay. I know we asked about, could we find a different way to report? And we've looked and we looked and looked. The only really reporting system that I can find is the one that we're using, with the reports that I've given you once a month here the last few months. That's the only one that gives us actually an output. Something like that at least give us indication of what's going on with our budget.
Okay.
So there's not another. I've worked with our financial advisors. the only one, so yeah, I was surprised they didn't even have one.
Okay. So this seems like a little bit of a different ask than what we did before. Is it like we're looking?
Yeah, I think it might be an extension. I mean, again, I did write down technologies, and so thank you for connecting with the financial advisor. I totally agree. I was not asking, let me rephrase it, I was not interpreting that we would replace the existing system. You would have that in place just because there's so many systems that we can select from, and it's already set in place. I think if the data is already in, if the data is available that's inputted into that system, and not saying there's an easy way to extract it or use an API or whatever it may be, is there another tool that could give us better financial projections, forecasting, analysis, and if the financial person that you spoke with says there's no tool out there that we could take the data from and manipulate it, seems okay. I mean, not okay, but that's the answer then. And so I think part of this RFP would be also maybe get another third-party person who they would also look to say, are there other technologies that we could leverage? But if I'm hearing from you, you've talked to enough people and there's no technology we can consider.
Yeah, there's not a technology except for what we're using right now. The only one system comes from Frontline that will take our data and give us some type of output to compare a budget month to month.
This is a surprise to me, and I agree with you, Brian, we need to read this and know what's going on. But I have two questions. Number one, don't answer them now, but I need those answers when we discuss this in the future. Why? Why do we want to do this? Number two, what would a projected cost be for something like this? I don't want to go into this blind. So those are the two questions that I would need to answer before I even consider this.
I'll tell you right now, the fact that Carly was asking questions on why did we deplete our savings account over the past 4 years, the fact that Kim asked these questions and we don't have a solid artifact that explained our financial history over the past 4 years.
Well, that's your
of where we are
opinion.
today.
That's not necessarily the opinion of all the board members, so.
But I'm answering your question, Terry. And so the second component is that part of an RFP is to gather the cost of what it might be. I don't know. And so that's why you go to RFP and you find out. The result might be that we don't do it because it might be too expensive. But these are the 4 items that I am proposing.
Well,
so you can choose at the next meeting saying you don't want to move forward.
Pardon?
Then you can choose at the next meeting that you don't want to move forward. And that's okay.
Hey, Bill,
I don't know.
for these items that he's bulleted on here, how is this different than the audit that we already do as a district financially?
Well, the audit we do with the district that we have to do by law is specifically a financial audit. So they come in, look at where we're spending our money, is it legal, where are we putting them in the right places? So all those pieces have to match up with the expectation of the way the state wants us to spend our money.
From an accounting perspective.
Yeah, it's an account. So what they do then, so when we see our statements, when you go through our annual report, when the statements are in there, they say, yes, the district built that statement correctly. And as you know, last year, we didn't get any findings whatsoever on anything that we did. So
Right.
we're reporting out the way the state of Minnesota wants us to report it.
So would this, would something like this be helpful to you and then maybe like to the district as a whole to kind of get like a baseline of where we're at and what we're doing? And I mean, would it be helpful to you? Like I'm just curious.
Well, I network with a lot of school districts, okay? I know business managers from many school districts. And so I know how we run the finances in school districts and the way we report. And like I said, what we're doing is what the expectation of the state of Minnesota is, okay? So I'm not sure how to build this budget a little different, or any more type of detail. I need to understand better what maybe Brian wants.
So my recommendation is, I'm not sure, an RFP is extremely time-consuming and costly for a district to respond to. Or, you know, if we have somebody doing it, but the work that they have to do, once the RFPs come in, to determine the value of them, and then just providing this information. But I think a lot of what's on there isn't because of what we're doing or how we're doing. The information's all out there. It's on the dashboards, it's in the budget book, it's in the documents we received tonight. It's all out there. I think some of it's just simply because there's some unknowns about how some of it works, that you either learn over time or we sit down and have some dedicated time learning and understanding what some of those elements mean about what goes into the education into a classroom and the supports that go into a classroom and what some of those line items mean. It might just help to have some conversations around the budgets, like when we were, like some of those board development work sessions that we had scheduled would be really good to just talk about elements of the budget and have everybody get a better understanding of what those mean. I think that would be more beneficial. I think the new board members are too new, I believe, even though it's been 2 years. The budgets are so complicated for school districts. I think just getting to understand them and those timelines that, like Carly said today in our engagement event that we were at with the 3 of us and the active seniors, was about how complicated it is, and it's not in sync with any of the state calendar timelines or any of that kind of stuff. And I think to really understand our timelines, how we operate, and what goes into the components of our budget in a little bit more detail might be able to be more helpful than doing and spending time and money and doing an RFP.
Right.
So part of an RFP is not a lot of work. You put this out there and vendors review it. They may have a time period where they may ask questions, but understand that there is a little level of effort of reviewing the responses to make sure if it's in line that we want to do. While the newer board members are again newer, the older board members are, maybe they don't understand governance, maybe they don't understand transparency or know what's going on how we got here in the past 4 years. But I don't know, there's a difference between new and old, I guess. So.
Well, I just still think there's a lot to learn, whether you're new or old. The budget and expectations and what goes into a budget changes all the time, and understanding what's getting funded and underfunded and how things unfold. So I just think there's a lot to learn about that, because when the RFPs come back, there's an evaluation process that has to be done to determine who to move forward, how to move forward, if we're gonna move forward. And I think knowing the budget process and the budget details would be more beneficial, taking the time to learn and understand that now than going through the RFP process and hoping we select somebody that can do what we're trying to do.
Bill, is there anything on here that would help you in your work? Like if you had a wish list.
It would depend what things they look at. When we look at our, processes of how we are, making payments, pulling our revenues in, I mean, like I say, we're following all the GAAP rules from the federal side. When we look at our budgeting process, I mean, we're involving many people. It's not just 2 people sitting down and deciding what we're gonna do, right? Really, a lot of the budget, comes from the departments, the needs that they have. It's not me telling everybody what they're gonna do. I just track how it's gonna cost, right?
Right.
So that's really where a lot of that information is coming from. Would be a tiny bit of concern about the time on that, because I know how long it takes us to do our audit now, and it's hundreds and hundreds of hours for our staff. And this would be very similar. And I don't know how we find time to do it, because they're not gonna come find it themselves. We'd have to bring the information to them. So that'd be one concern.
I would add for Bill, I think it would be an overreach to say that the board tells Bill how his staff needs to operate. He's the expert in finance. He knows what he has limitations on and what he doesn't have limitations on. He knows the strengths and the weaknesses of his folks. I think some of the other things on here, get something to the level that's understandable to the reasonable not that understandable to the average stakeholder. Well, what is that? How are you going to be able to determine that? That seems very vague to me. There just seems to be some things in here ensuring transparency and clarity. I don't know that Bill can be much more transparent in what he shares as a district. Now, being able to be understood is different because school finance is different than our checkbook at home compared to what that is. And so unless you're going through training, and even with training, not everybody understands it. There's nuances from state to state, from district to district on how they do something. So we have nothing against trying to share information. I just think that going through this process when we know there's only certain technologies, Bill's working with his staff to be as efficient and effective as he can
And we have our
be.
finance advisory.
And you have a finance advisory group. You know, if there's something that's not clear, similar to what Carly was saying earlier, if there's something that you want to know, I've said in my 2 years here, all you need to tell is whoever the board chair is and myself, and we'll try to get something set up in a development for you to be able to understand what that process is. And everybody learns at a different pace. It's not any different than kids in a classroom when a teacher's trying to teach. And I think that's, for being fair to Bill, he's got different levels of understanding in the room and different levels of understanding in the community, and it's awfully hard to be able to balance that and be able to provide what's going to meet the need. That's why I said if the board agrees to what they feel is needed, then he can provide that to the best of his ability. It's hard to do that if it's scattered.
Dave, did you have something?
I think the big thing is the public needs to be educated and the trust needs to be built back up, and all the misinformation that's been floating around, I think that would make a big effort.
Carly, did you have something you wanted to say? It looked like you raised your hand.
Yeah, I do. You know, I'm just thinking about this from like how it might help, because I just want to say that I think Bill has proven, you know, with the audit and everything else, that he's dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. I think sometimes when I think about kind of where our district is, we do have a lot of new people in leadership across the, you know, board and the administration, and so. One way I think this could be helpful is to just be able to look at how we're doing things. Maybe, I mean, just if someone does have more expertise around how big districts run. And one example I can think of is we might get information about, yeah, this is maybe more inefficient, but it works for our district. For instance, we have 2 high schools. A lot of big cities or big districts like Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, they have 1. I think it costs us a lot more money to have 2 high schools, but guess what? We've all talked about how our kids have way more opportunities because we have 2 high schools. So that might be something where we get information from this person about, you know, this is inefficient to run it this way, and we might look at that and be like, okay, we're going to accept that because it just makes us versus like that is an area where we could address something we do differently that maybe isn't helpful. So that's just my thought.
And there's also something that MSB, or is it it's the state that does it, that financial certification that we've received. And that's different from the accounting audit that we do. Do you know what I'm talking about, right?
The state of Minnesota has like check marks. You're doing what you're doing.
To make sure you're doing all this different stuff, and it's what we've received many years in a row. It says to your community that your district is following all these things and doing all these things right, and making sure that you can trust what's coming out of the business office. And there's certain things that you have to have. That's where one of those, in order to get it, we had to develop the fund balance policy, because you had to have a fund balance policy in place. So they have a checklist of all the things that you need to do. And so, you know, there's things out there already, different tools and different checklists and assessments that are out there to be used, that we can, you know, earn and do.
Haven't heard from you, Terry.
For me?
Yeah.
I still.
He started.
I started this, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
You haven't
done.
changed your mind or anything? You
I'm
just-
done.
Okay. So as a board, like, what do you want to do with this moving forward? Do you want to have more time to work on it? Do you want,
Well,
I believe I recall, Terry said you needed some time to think through it, and it sounds like others do as well. And let's push it to the next board meeting and as a working session. If you want to move forward with it, great. If not, no big deal. This is my point of view based on my experience. And again, at the end of the day, guys, it's not my money. It's the community's money. It's not my school. It's our school. And so if there's a need and opportunity to provide a bit more transparency around how we got where we are today and make sure that people know how we're spending $206 million, makes sense to me. But if you guys don't think so, you don't think so.
I think we should at least review it.
At another working session.
Yes.
Okay. We can put it on the agenda for the next working session. Is that where I'm feeling the consensus is? Yeah,
sure.
Okay. Is there any more information that the board needs with regards to this before that working session happens? Like, is there
Well,
something
it's
that
hard to
boards-
know because we haven't really reviewed it much.
The
Okay.
question I was asked, was this vetted through legal counsel, because there's certain requirements in RFP?
It has not, so I'm teeing it up there. Maybe the next step would be, is there alignment that this is something that the board wants to move forward with? And if so, then we can take it to that next step. But it sounds like the folks need to think about it, so.
I would like, I'm not saying that I disagree with
No, I understand.
with it at all, but I would like an opportunity to at least read through it more extensively, and then an opportunity to see what other districts are doing, and maybe talk with MSBA if that's, you know, and try to gather some information that way.
I think that's a good idea.
Just in general, is that okay? Like, everybody feels good about that? Okay. Bill, if there's anything you need with regards to this, or if you have any other information you can provide, please feel free to do that too. Anyway, all right, so unless there's any other questions on that, we'll go ahead and just, looks like we've completed everything on our agenda, and we will adjourn for the night at 8:11. Thank you, everyone.